I get my messages all kind of different ways, but this is the first time I kind of stole Sister Denise's thought process because it didn't work for her. It didn't work for her. Scripturally wise, it didn't work for her, but one of the scriptures just stuck in my head, and I went with it. And thank Yahweh for that. You know, I'm always, not just, when we fall short, we know that it's us that falls short. And I'm getting signals. It's us that fall short. We know there's no fault in Yahweh. So when we fall short, we miss the mark, we didn't stay on point with the way we know we ought to be, that the shortcoming is in us. And so I'm always, looking at different things because I want the answer. I want to know, where did the shortcoming come from? I need to see what the shortcoming is so that it doesn't happen again. If we don't know, it's going to happen again. So I do this not just for myself, but to everybody that I have association with that I know is trying to walk this walk, and they aren't victorious. They fall short. And it's like, why, yeah? Why is it that, what's going on? So this is one of those situations where it kind of falls into that. And also, as I'm going through here, I can't help it, I'm going to teach you all that you cannot just read the word verbatim. Because we have a tendency that when we hit certain words, we understand it as we understand it. And we put that definition in, and instead of what was meant in the text. So as we go on, we're going to hit one of those spots too. So my scripture, well, let me give you the name of the message first. Lose your identity. So the problem is we try to maintain our identity instead of lose our identity. So in today's society, that's a big thing. It's all about self. It's who I am, what I want, what I like. It's about me. To the place where we have couples who get married. A woman wants to keep her last name because she doesn't want to lose her identity. Like her identity is in her name. We're not Yahweh. The only being whose identity is wrapped up in his name is Yahweh. His identity is wrapped up in his name. But that's not with us, because how many Marks are there in the world? And Chloe's and Micah's. There's lots of, Jeremy's. And I'm sure if we used his right name, his given name, there's a few of those too. So we all have names that our identity is not wrapped up in our name, but we don't want to lose our identity. So that's part of our problem. And we may not recognize it because we don't think of it like that. But it is what we're doing. We want to maintain our identity. So my scripture is going to be, where do Will go? So my main scripture, kind of my main scripture, is about the shadow. So you can see your shadow, and in your shadow you can do, in your shadow, people do those little things and make the butterflies, and because what you're doing, your shadow will do. Like me and my shadow, it goes wherever I go. So your shadow is a reflection of you, just not a mirror reflection, but a reflection of you. So everything that you do, your shadow's going to do. It's a reflection of you. Now, in order to have a shadow, there has to be light. In the dark time, there's no shadow unless you go under the street light or the house light. So the scripture so y'all see my shadow, and now my shadow is gone because it's being blocked by this one. So, but my shadow is lost. Can you do some hand movements? But you can see his shadow. Can you see William's movement? But I'm gone. You can't see me no more. That's losing your identity, right? He that dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Okay, so it's a point of losing your identity. It's not being Yahweh's shadow. You don't move as he moves. You're lost in his shadow. Now, we have a problem with this, though, from what that means to us, right? What does it mean to be in the shadow? In the shadow of someone or something means you get less attention or are considered less notable, less important, or successful compared to the someone or something else. If you live in the shadow of someone or in their shadow, their achievements and abilities are so great that you are not noticed. We in ourselves, our flesh, don't like this. So if you have sibling rivalry, and so it's usually because they're in the shadow. You know, if you have that first child that goes to school and they're do really good, and then the next child goes to school and they have all the same teachers. Why aren't you like your brother? Why aren't you like your sister? You know, and you get stuck in that shadow, their abilities and their attention, and now you've kind of got lost and you don't like it. And so you try to venture off into something that the other sibling doesn't do, or if it's a coworker or however, we don't like to be in somebody's shadow, naturally. So it is difficult for us to abide. Note that what the scripture said, that we have to abide, we have to stay. If you're in the secret place of the Most High, you shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. So there's a part that I have to do. I have to stay there. I have to stay there. And so therefore, all the glory, all the credit goes to Yahweh. Now, we say this all the time, but we have to understand that it's contrary to who we are, our natural self. So this is where we wrestle sometimes. So we have to understand that when we are in the shadow of someone, we lose our identity. When we are in the shadow of the Almighty, we lose our identity to him. No longer I, but Yahshua in me. So I want you to see the scripture's going to bear this out, that I have to lose my identity. I am crucified with Messiah. Nevertheless, I live. Yet, not I, but Messiah lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of Yahweh who loved me and gave himself for me. So Paul is saying to the Galatians the same thing. He said, I'm crucified. I'm dead. I've lost my identity. I don't exist anymore. I'm crucified with Messiah. Nevertheless, I'm alive. But it isn't me. It's Yahshua in me, right? It's not me. It's Yahshua in me. My identity is wrapped up in him now. And the life which I now live in the flesh, what you see my physicalness, I live by faith that it's him that's living in me. Okay? It's like I'm possessed. And right away we think of the evil stuff. Influenced or controlled by something, but willingly. I give this willingly. So when we look at demonic, it's by force. But here, I'm allowing him, or I should allow him, and want him to control. I want you to take over. So I become this willing vessel. I choose to abide under the shadow of the Almighty. It's like I die daily. You know, or Paul said, I die daily. So it's something I have to do every day because every morning, self wants to wake up. Everybody who gets up in the morning got to go to work. If you haven't, it's like, I got to get to work. Or you've trained yourself by now to say, oh, Yahweh, thank you for my job. You know, and then you go on from there. But it's not something you want to get up and go do. So it's the same thing. Every day, I have to put myself under the shadow of the Almighty. Lose your identity. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. And they that are Messiahs have crucified the flesh with the affections and lust. So here, Paul is again talking to the Galatians, and he says, but the fruit of the Spirit. Now, he says this after he talked about the works of the flesh. And then he said, the fruit of the Spirit. So he said, your natural body is like this. It's wicked. And then he lists all these wicked things that are produced, works that you'll do through your flesh. And then he says, but the fruit of the Spirit. Now, I have had, Yahweh got me on this a long time ago, walking around in the kitchen. Of course, I spent a lot more time in the kitchen when my kids were younger than I do now. But in the kitchen, it's like I lived in the kitchen. So I'm in the kitchen, and Yahweh's just, well, how's that scripture go? And miraculously, I knew exactly what scripture he was talking about. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy. He said, how's that scripture go? But the fruit of the Spirit is love. What's that say? I said, the fruit of the Spirit. And he says, you'll never have this fruit. So it was obviously at a time where I was trying to possess this fruit in and of myself. So this is where we begin to have our problems. We see what the word says, and then I try to do it. Instead of recognizing that this isn't me. This will never be me. This is the fruit of the Spirit. This is Yahshua. He's love. He's joy. He's peace. My joy I give to you. My peace I give to you. It's him. And then against that, there's no law. There's no condemnation. That's what it means. There's no condemnation. And they that are Messiahs have crucified the flesh. You've killed the thing that's enmity against Yahweh, and you've allowed what has reconciled you to him, which is Yahshua, to live through you. Do not be conformed to fashion like, but be ye transformed, which means change. Now, I have spoken on this before about the difference between being conformed and being transformed. And being conformed, what we don't want our children to do. We don't want our children to be like the world. They go to school, especially when they start middle school, going into high school. They want the hairstyles, they want the clothes, they want the shoes. They want to look like everybody else. They want to watch what's popular. That's conforming. They're the same them inside. They have the same likes and dislikes. That was always them, but now they want to look like something else. Now, transformation is that change. A tadpole lives in water. You take it out the water and put it on it just like any other fish. It'll die. But eventually it's going to become a frog. If you take that frog and submerge it in water, it will drown. It's not the same thing. It turned into something completely different. Okay, so that's transformation. So we have in nature that and the caterpillar and the butterfly are two best examples of transformation, something that completely changes into something else. That's what the scripture tells us to do. If any man be in Messiah, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. I'm not supposed to be putting on something like just a change of clothes. Like I got dirty, so let me just go change my clothes. But I didn't change where I'm going to go, and I'm going right back to where I got dirty in the first place. Those that have children and you were going somewhere, you always get the kids dressed first and then take care of you. Sit right here. Don't do anything because you're going somewhere and they got nice clothes on. Don't move. Give me, maybe you turn the TV on to entertain them, whatever. Just be still because they're all set and ready. You go your 20 minutes, come back, and some child's got Kool-Aid all over them, and it's like, oh my goodness. They just can't do it, And if you clean them up and turn away again, they'll be right back dirty. You always have that one, So just changing the clothes, or if you realize that you need a remake or you're wounded, this is not just putting a Band-Aid over. This is a complete change. This is not the you that you're familiar with anymore. Now, I did want to add, in case you all go behind and check on me, I use King James so that you understand. The word conformed is only in one other scripture, and that is in Romans 8:29. For whom he did foreknow, he also did predestinate to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many believers. And then right away you're thinking, well, see, it says right there to be conformed. Different word. If you look into concordance, it's a different word. It's not the same word as over in chapter 12. This conformed is a different word in the Greek and means jointly formed. Notice what he said here. He also did predestinate it to be conformed to the image of his Son. So jointly formed, he's saying created in the image of his Son. So it's not, you looking like or acting like Yahshua. He's going to conform you, jointly form you into the image of his Son. He's forming and fashioning you into the image of his Son. We are not to be conformed to Messiah. We are to be transformed. We are not to look like Messiah. We are to be Messiah by allowing him to live through us. Created in the image of his Son. Lose your identity. Now, this is where I'm going to give some little bit more instruction. Again, I use King James, Ephesians 5:1. Be ye therefore followers of Yahweh as dear beloved children. There are other translations out there that say, be ye. Pastor Jeremiah, what does your translation say? Imitators. Imitators. This is what I'm talking about. We need to learn how to study because everything I just said, did I give you scripture for? Did not say to imitate Yahshua, did it? It said, let him live in you. That's wrong. If you look up what it means, it says followers. Why I couldn't say followers in the first place, I don't know. So I got to go searching, right? Because everything I look up about imitation is like, fake, copy, counterfeit. I got issues here with this scripture because it is not lining up with the rest of the scriptures. Yahshua never asked anyone to imitate him. And he said unto them, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Follow me here means come hither. I lead, you come behind. It actually has two Greek words. And it's come hither, I lead, you come behind. Then Yahshua said unto his disciples, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. He didn't say copy me, be like me. He said follow me. Yahshua said unto him, if thou wilt be perfect, go and sell that thou hast, and give to the poor, and thou shalt have treasure in heaven, and come and follow me. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. Are y'all getting this? If any man serve me, let him follow me. And where I am, there shall he be. Also my servant be. If any man serve me, him will my Father honor. Now all those scriptures that I just read, I gave you the definition for the first. All of those have the same definition, same word for follow, and that is to accompany, specifically as a disciple. So you walk with me and learn of me. If any man come to me and hate not his father and mother and wife and children and brethren and sisters, yea, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. And whosoever doth not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. This come after me is again two words in the Greek. First, accompany. The second is the same as I lead, you come behind. I want you to think about this. Yahshua, I'm in behind. He who abideth in the shadow of the Almighty. He's there, and I'm in his shadow. All those come follow me. He wanted them to come up behind him. They would be in his shadow. So back to Ephesians 5:1. Be ye therefore followers of Yahweh as dear children. Some translations, be ye therefore imitators. Yahshua never asked anyone to imitate him. Imitation, a thing intended to simulate or copy something else. So it's a thing intended to simulate or copy something else. So right away, my mind went to, okay, what are some imitations? Sheep's and wolves' clothing. Imitator. Right? People who wear masks. Sister Denise just not long ago preached about people who wear masks. People just going through the motions. Religious people. Be ye transformed, not conformed. What is the difference between copying and following? Imitation or following. Copy or following. Copying, I need, get this. Copying is imitating an action. Following is imitating the principle behind the action. Copy is an act of copying the result. Follow is the act of knowing the process through which the result was achieved and then copying the process. In English, the word copy and follow are used interchangeably. thereby diluting the entire meaning of the words. Dictionary. They're not synonymous. They're different words. Copying is not following. And copying, like we read, just like I shared, it said the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace. And I read that. I'm a follower of Yah. And so I try to be like that. That's imitating. I'm imitating what I see him do. I see him do it. I'm imitating his action. And guess what happens? Fall short all the time. Because I don't get the principle. I don't understand. I haven't allowed myself to be taught, discipled on the how-to, which if I get it, I get to understand that that's never going to be in my flesh. I want y'all to understand that's why you get new bodies. The Bible didn't say Yahshua, when he died, that now we're not enemies. Paul's talking to Galatians after the fact. He said, your flesh is enmity against Yahweh. Your body will never be reconciled. Your flesh, it's not salvageable. That's why he came to regenerate the spirit within you and then command you to put on the new man, which is created in the likeness of Yahshua. You got to put on the new man. And therefore, when Yahshua returns, you get a new body to go with the new man. Right? That's what happens. You get a new body to go with the new man. This body ain't going nowhere. So right now, we're constantly wrestling with this thing who doesn't want to be in anybody's shadow. It wants to have some acclimates. It wants to have some pats on the back and some applause. It's what it wants. But this is not what we should be seeking after. We should be pleased that the acclamates of Yahweh be proclaimed when people see us. When the visitation, when people see us and they acclaim our God, which is what the scripture says should happen. That we make these proclamations. David, when he talks about coming into the house of Yahweh, for the people to, to share the testimony, that what? That they would glorify Yahweh with me. So that I want you to share and glorify Yahweh with me. Not say how good of a warrior I am, or how successful I am, or how powerful I am, or how lofty I am, but how Yahweh is great and greatly to be praised. We don't need to fear the shadow of anything. When we're in the shadow of the Almighty, we don't need to fear anything. Sister Jamie sang the song, I will not fear the storm. And then it just said, I will not fear. I will not fear. I don't have to be afraid of anything. And so I'm going to close with this last verse because it also brings up the word shadow. And it's Psalms 23:4. Say, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. So let's talk about the shadow again for a second. When I'm in under the shadow of the Almighty, I lose my identity. I'm hid. I'm hid. You can't see me. I can do motions, but you can't see me because I'm in Yahweh's shadow. The shadow of death is the shadow of death. It moves like death, right? It looks like death, but it's not death. It's death's shadow. So it moves and looks, and you think it's death, but it's just the shadow of death. When our identity is hid in Yahshua, death has no power over us. right? Death, where is your sting? But that is as long as I'm in the under the shadow of the Almighty. Because now that I can walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. I'm hid in him. Death can't even see me. Not even the shadow of death can see me or recognize me. Death has no power over Yahweh. It had no power over Yahshua. So it has no power over us. So we don't have to fear anything. Death, where is thy sting? I want to encourage everybody today, lose your identity. Stop trying to be in control. When you feel the need to be in control, turn it over to Yahweh. When there are decisions have to be made in life. In all areas of life, decisions have to be made. But don't allow yourself to be pushed into a corner where it has to be done right now and you act in your flesh. Take the moment to seek Yahweh. Take the moment to allow the Spirit of Yahweh to take control. Be the one that gives the answer. Don't trust in these physical things. People say, oh, I know it was Yahweh because I had butterflies in my stomach. My feet were tingling. My eye was twitching. No, that's not Yahweh. Yahweh, he wants you to do this by faith. So you're not going to be getting any little signals. Yahweh let me know it was him because I felt this, tremor in my heart or, whatever. People have, I don't know how much you've been around. I've been around some people who claim some different stuff. Yahweh doesn't do that. Now, let me step back a second because I don't want to put Yahweh in a box. He may do that for a newbie, to get them used to under hearing his word, give them a little. But that's just like a training thing. And eventually that's going to stop and you're going to have to know his voice, recognize his voice when he's talking to you and not that little feeling in your gut, indigestion. Okay, that's not Yahweh. Or I had a dream and there'd be some really weird dream. And instead I'd be like, really, what did you eat? It's not always this thing, and we want to make it that way because we want it to be, but that's not Yahweh. We're to lose our identity in him and walk by faith. And so the only way we're able to do this, and it's going to be successful, is we have to know the word of Yahweh. We have to know the word of Yahweh. Yahweh doesn't talk anywhere beyond his word. He's going to, so even when we're looking at scripture, just as I started, and I gave you all these scriptures that show that he's not, nowhere does he want us to imitate him. But then I go and read a scripture, be ye imitators. What? That doesn't line up with the rest of the word. So obviously, there's some fault here, but it's not in Yahweh. I got to do some research and make that line up with the rest of the scripture. And if I can't make it line up with the rest of the scripture, I'll push it aside for a moment. I'm not going to preach on it. I'm not going to teach on it. We'll just push it over there until we get answers because it doesn't line up with the rest of the scripture. One scripture isn't going to contradict the rest. It all says one thing and the same. So if you're reading or studying or doing, even for spiritualization, for when we're taking the natural and spiritualizing it, it still has to have the same flow. Like today when we were talking about on the way to the refuge cities, they have to have clear access. Okay? Now I got to spiritualize that. It has to mean the same thing. I can't make it mean something different. It has to mean the same thing. People that are looking for refuge need to have clear access. Yahshua is our refuge. I have to make sure I'm not a stumbling block to them or get other stumbling blocks up out of their way so that they can have clear, direct access to their refuge. Their refuge isn't me. It's not us. It's Yahshua. And so sometimes because we didn't lose our identity in him, we think we can help them. And we get people in a worser way, or we get them following after us. And then when they see us, oh boy, they need some help, because us ain't right. Us fall on our face sometimes. Us get angry. Us do some stuff that ain't right sometimes. And it causes this thought of hypocrisy and people not wanting to come and follow after. We have to lose our identity in him. And so, again, I encourage you all, it's okay. Who doesn't want to be Yahshua?
Walk in the spirit of a new day. Cast all your own self, all your